Hello friends, today in the lecture we will talk about Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and his contribution to the national movement. As all of us are aware that Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose played an important role, especially in the later part of the national movement, though he was associated with the Congress initially and he left the Congress when he established the Forward Bloc, and his contribution when he became the Supreme Commander of the Indian National Army or the Azad Hind Fauj. And we find that the kind of personality which Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had, that despite being the part of the ICS, when he was able to join the ICS, he resigned from the ICS when he became aware of the Jallianwala Bagh massacre. After that he resigned, and the kind of approach which he had, that he was ready to in a way confront Gandhi at times, who was the in a way supremo of the Congress party at that point of time, that whatever Gandhi said, it was generally not rejected by the Congress party. But Netaji had these kinds of guts to in a way express his opinions, and even he contested the post of the president, and he was successful as well. He became the president of the Congress, even when against the wishes of Gandhi in that sense. So we find that his contribution to the national movement is immense, and in this particular framework we will try to see the journey of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose when he joined the Congress party and participated in the national movement, and thereafter one of the important aspect which is associated with Netaji is that his death became some kind of an enigma, in that sense that there were investigative committees which were formed by the government to find about it, and it is generally being claimed that the official version which was given by the Japanese government, that when Netaji died, was not accepted by a majority of people in India, and it was suggested that he was alive and he survived that air crash, which is attributed to his death. So in the course of our discussion we will talk about the various kinds of contributions which have been made by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and when he gave this kind of a call of Delhi chalo or tum mujhe khoon do main tumhe azadi dunga, and how people they responded to it, and not only in the kind of political sphere where Netaji became so popular, and there were so many people who were ready to join his call during the INA, this kind of a government which became some kind of a movement. But at the same time, in the popular culture as well, we find that so many films on Netaji they were also made at different points of time, and his memory, how it is there in the popular culture or popular memory, he is so alive, that can also be seen in the framework that when his statue was installed at India Gate recently, then we find that it was also very well received by the masses. When one is talking about the references, then one can refer to the history and culture of the Indian people. That is one of the volumes called The Struggle for Swaraj by R.C. Majumdar, which is published by the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan. B.L. Grover's A New Look at the Modern Indian History, one can see that as well. And the IGNOU source material could also be referred when one is talking about a contribution of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Apart from that, a lot of books were also written by Netaji himself, they can also be seen. Then there is another book which has been published by NCERT, which is again talking about some kind of a biographical sketch of Netaji. And when you talk about that, how his birth anniversary is also celebrated as the Parakram Divas, and how he was born on January 23, 1897 in Cuttack in Orissa. And when you see that over a period of time, the kind of presence which Netaji had in the national movement. We find that he did not remain some kind of a person only, but he had that kind of a philosophy, and his contribution to the national movement, it became some sort of a mission as well, that how he in a way worked to liberate India out of the clutches of the colonial rule. And as I told you earlier as well, that he left the civil services apprenticeship midway to return to India in 1921, and he was disturbed by the Jallianwala Bagh massacre and how he sacrificed his career for the nation. And thereafter he joined the National Congress, and he worked under Deshbandhu Chittaranjan Das, whom he later acknowledged his political guru as well. And we find that how Netaji was quite blatant in his utterances. He did not mince any kind of words, even when he wanted to express his opinion. And we find that this kind of a character or approach of Netaji could be seen in his entire lifetime, where whenever he saw that he did not like or agree to an opinion or an action, then he was ready to in a way discuss that kind of an aspect or even reject that kind of an aspect. So we find that how during the kind of course of work which Netaji was there, he was jailed several times during the various movements which were launched, and even during the civil disobedience movement he was jailed, and he was released in 1931 after the Gandhi-Irwin pact was signed. But he was not happy when this kind of a pact was signed, and he opposed the suspension of the civil disobedience movement, especially when Bhagat Singh and his associates, they were being hanged. So he did not like this kind of an aspect where we find that civil disobedience movement was suspended by Gandhiji, and this kind of a self-belief and commitments to one's belief could be seen in Netaji. And we find that despite being jailed several times, he was ready to go to jail the next time as well, because it did not deter him from the kind of activities in which he was involved. And when we talk about the career of Netaji, then we find that how he was the president of the Haripura Congress session in 1938, and he set up a national planning committee in October that year. So that kind of a vision which he had, that some kind of a planning was necessary for the development and growth of India. And so with this vision, he also initiated the planning committee, and when he got elected to the Tripuri Congress session in 1939, we find that Pattabhi Sitaramaiah was defeated by him, and Pattabhi Sitaramaiah was a candidate who was supported by Mahatma Gandhi and others. And despite that, Netaji was so popular among the people that those who were voting, and they supported Netaji. And we find that he brought a resolution to give British 6 months to hand India over to the Indians, following which there would be a revolt. So Netaji had this kind of a streak in his character, that he was ready to take on the British in the kind of activities or efforts which he was making for the independence of India. And we find that when he found that a lot of opposition was there to him when he became the president, and so he did not like it, and he resigned from the post of the president and formed a progressive group which was known as the Forward Bloc. And we find that how he started a mass movement against utilizing the Indian resources and men for the Great War. So he did not like that when British, they were utilizing the Indian resources, Indian men, they were fighting for the British in the Second World War. So this was not at all liked by Netaji, and he in a way rejected this kind of an idea. and we find that these kinds of utterances, there was a tremendous response to his call. People, they came in support of Netaji, and he was put under house arrest in Calcutta because of this. Then we find in January 1941, Subhash Chandra Bose disappeared from his home in Calcutta and reached Germany via Afghanistan. So, how he met Hitler, and we find that he was also seeking support from Germany for the independence of India. And then we find that in January 1942 he began his regular broadcast from the Radio Berlin, which aroused tremendous enthusiasm in India. And during this time we also find that Tokyo Conference was also held, and the Tokyo Conference, it passed a resolution to form an Indian National Army, and we also see that Indian Independence League of Overseas Indians was provisionally established throughout Japanese Asia, and it was decided to hold a fully representative conference of the Indians at Bangkok in June. And when such kind of decisions, they were being taken at this point of time, and this conference was held in Bangkok in June 1942, and we see that how tricolor flag was raised by Rash Behari Bose, and the conference was formally inaugurated Indian Independence League IIL with a definite constitution. And when you talk about the contribution or the objectives of the league, it was defined to be the attainment of complete and immediate independence of India. So, we find that despite being outside India, despite taking support from Germany, Japan and other countries, we find that Netaji had this kind of patriotism filled in him, that he says that he did not want to become some kind of a slave to the Japanese, even if they were providing him all sorts of assistance. So, that was the kind of the feeling of patriotism which was there in Netaji, and he had that kind of a self belief that even when he will go to these nations, he will be able to generate a lot of support for the Indian national movement. And we find that in this particular conference which we were talking about, 35 resolutions they were being passed, including the one inviting Subhash Bose to East India, because by that time he had not reached there. And then we see that in July 1943 Bose arrived in Singapore from Germany, and in Singapore he took over the reins of Indian independence movement in East Asia from Rash Behari Bose, and organized Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army, which had already been started by Mohan Singh and others. So, we find that in this particular Fauj, or in this army, mainly Indian prisoners of war, they were there, and we see that how the arrival of Netaji at this particular place boosted the morale of the people, those who were there, and how the army which was there, it hailed in a way Netaji, and the civilian population in East Asia was also in a way propelled by the arrival of Netaji. And when he formed the provisional government of Free India and to lead the Indian National Army to in a way towards India, so that India can achieve independence, we find that so many soldiers, they attended to the call of Netaji. They were ready to sacrifice and they lay their lives, and various kinds of brigades they were also being formed. One of them was also Gandhi Brigade and the Subhash Brigade, and there were also others, those who were supporting Netaji in this endeavor, and we find that he also became the first Prime Minister of this particular government which he started there. And when he in a way gave the call of Chalo Delhi, or March to Delhi, and the total mobilization in that sense. So, these cries, these kinds of slogans, they were also being taken very well by the people, those who were supporting Netaji. And when he said that तुम मुझे खून दो मैं तुम्हें आज़ादी दूंगा, it became so popular because people, they had to sacrifice themselves to attain independence from the suppressive colonial rule. And we find that how Azad Hind Fauj, or the Indian National Army, it proceeded towards India to liberate it from the British rule. And when Netaji was talking about taking help from other nations, it did not mean that he was ready to in a way become some sort of slave to other nations. He had some kind of a self-belief in himself, and he had that kind of a confidence that with their own efforts, with their own people, India would be able to achieve independence for itself. So if Japanese would sacrifice themselves for India, then he said that it would be worse than slavery. And that is how he talks about the ideas of national honor. And he said that Indians, they had to make the maximum contribution of blood and sacrifice themselves if they want to achieve independence. And that is how the soldiers of INA, they were being urged that how they have to participate wholeheartedly and with their maximum capacity to liberate India from the colonial rule. And how INA, it was being allowed to form some kind of a spearhead of the coming offensive was also because of the efforts of Netaji. And we find that INA also shifted its headquarters to Rangoon in January 1944, and how it crossed Burma border and stood on Indian soil in March 1944. And we find that how one of the important aspects which is associated with Netaji was relating to his death, that how when he left Bangkok with a single companion in a twin engine Japanese bomber carrying senior Japanese officers to Tokyo via Darren, Manchuria, and how it arrived safely at Taipei in Formosa at about 2 p.m. on 18th August. And after lunch it left Taipei. This is all that is known. What happened after this is still uncertain, though a number of commissions, they were also appointed to look into the issue of death of Netaji, and no conclusive kind of proof could come out because both kinds of views, they were being there, because the official Japanese version issued at the time of his mysterious kind of a death, which is officially in a way recognized by the Japanese authorities, and they argued that it was almost immediately after the plane had taken off, it caught the fire, and Netaji was badly burnt, somehow came out of aeroplane, as was removed to a hospital where he died that very night between 8 and 9 p.m. This story was in a way discredited in India from the very beginning, because so many people, they in a way rejected this kind of an argument that Netaji died in that aeroplane crash, and they suggested that he was able to survive that, and he resurfaced in India and in the regions, and we find that a commission of inquiry was appointed immediately after that, and majority of the officials, those who were the part of that inquiry, they held that the official version was correct or substantially correct. But one of the members, the elder brother of Netaji, he disagreed, as you can see on the screen, and pointed out many serious flaws in the method of inquiry. So this kind of a matter, it rested there, and the end of this valiant fighter for freedom is shrouded in mystery in that sense. So when you tend to understand this, that how Netaji at this point of time, when it is being argued that he was killed in an air crash over Taipei in that sense and Taiwan, Formosa, on August 18, 1945, and it was widely believed that he was still alive after the air crash, and not much information could be found about him. And we see that very few outside the official circles, they attached any importance to the report of committee of inquiry, which did not take evidence of the fellow passengers of Netaji, nor visited the aerodrome of Taipei where accident is supposed to have occurred. So when you talk about that how this kind of a report which was there with regard to his death, it was discredited, it was not in a way being in a way accepted. We find that one of the members, Satyanarayan Sinha, he visited the site and met at least one official who was there on 18th August 1945, day of the accident. And Sinha was convinced by his testimony as well as records that no plane accident occurred there on that date. So, pursuing his inquiry with admirable energy and patience, he could trace definitely further progress of Netaji's journey. So, when you talk about this kind of a report which was given by Sinha, we find that it can be summed up in that sense that Netaji's plane halted at Taipei for refueling and took off for Dairen in Manchuria at 14:30 hours on 18th August, and he arrived safely at Dairen and stayed there in disguise even after it was occupied by Russians. But his identity was discovered by the Russian officers, and we find that. And when you talk about Netaji and this kind of an argument, whether he survived that aeroplane crash or whether he perished in that, so no one view could be seen in that context, and no conclusive proof could also be received. And various historians, they have argued and they have given their own particular evidence with regard to that. And when you talk about Netaji, he was looked upon as a friend and partisan of German Nazis, and he was transported to Siberia, and no further information could be gathered by Sinha about Netaji's life behind Iron Curtain. So the truth of Sinha's story has not been tested by either government of India or any other public body, and it has been mentioned in R.C. Majumdar's work Struggle for Swaraj, which is published by the Bharati Vidya Bhavan. Though it regularly appeared in Sunday issues of Hindustan Standard, Calcutta in April 1965, and a large section of Indians, they believe that Netaji certainly did not die at Taipei and was alive. And when you talk about the memory, that how in the public memory Netaji is there, apart from the kind of various statues at different places, we find that a number of films they have also been made on Netaji. One of them was Netaji Subhash in 1947. Some sort of a documentary title based on the life of Subhash Chandra Bose was produced, which also included smuggled footage of the film print on Subhash Chandra Bose and Azad Hind Fauj. And this particular film was produced by Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and this particular film was shown to the various leaders of the national movement in Connaught Place, and it also instilled some kind of an inspiration to the leaders, that how Netaji was fighting that kind of a war, not in India but outside India that way as well. And apart from that, we also find that other films, they were also being made. Samadhi in 1950 with Ashok Kumar, then in 1966 Subhash Chandra Bose, a biography sort of a film was made. Then Shyam Benegal's work Forgotten Hero, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, Forgotten Hero, which was made in 2004, in which Sachin Khedekar played the role of the protagonist, and it also won the National Film Award for the best feature film on the national integration. And we see that such kinds of films or audiovisual material, they have kept the memory of Netaji alive. And later we also see Ami Subhash Bolchi in 2011, in which Mithun Chakravarti was there, or Rag Desh in 2017, periodic drama based on INA, which was set up by Netaji in a way it was reorganized by Netaji, and the war to liberate India that was fought on the shores of Irrawaddy in Burma. And we also see that a trial was held at Red Fort in Delhi that was called as the Red Fort Trials of 1945. So Ragdesh brings to life that epic trial that paved way for India's freedom and those meteoric times in that sense. So we find that such kind of portrayals, they also make us aware about what had happened in the past, and they in a way keep the memory of the past alive. And another film called Bose Dead or Alive, in which Rajkumar Rao played the role, that was also there, and Gumnami in 2019, which was based on Mukherjee Commission, which investigated the death of Subhash Chandra Bose, that was also made. And Forgotten Army in 2020, the story of 55,000 soldiers, most of whom died fighting the Japanese and English troops. Soldiers might have died in 1942, but they and their sacrifices are still alive in that sense. So these kinds of cinema, these kinds of films, they have tried to keep the memory of Netaji alive in their own way. Many times we find that some of the plots or some of the events, they are seen to be fictional in nature, but we have to also see that what has been written in the books is also not very conclusive. So there is a lot of debate with regard to the kind of death which Netaji had to face in that sense. And we also see that how Netaji was exceptional in the ways he motivated people with his speeches and slogans, and how he tackled big problems. So to end the discussion, I would like to suggest that how his contribution was also recognized by the government at different levels, and recently a statue was placed at India Gate to honor his contribution to the independence movement. And till this kind of a statue was installed, a hologram of Netaji was projected at the site of the statue, which was designed by Advait Gadanayak, and this is some kind of a symbol of India's indebtedness to Netaji. So with this, I would like to end the discussion. Thank you very much.